This is on North Carolina, of course, one of the places that has been seriously affected by water. Good morning. We are at the Johnson City Railroad Experience, and we're going to take a look at this map of the ET&WNC just to give you an idea of how big this layout is. 1,900 square feet, track run of 310 physical feet, and we'll go ahead and start with this preliminary look at the design that was done in the 3D format by Mike Sagers. So we'll start at Cranberry and work our way back to Johnson City. Let's start. So Cranberry, of course, was previously built during our time at the Carter Railroad Museum. And this is actually the initial drawing. Now, what's happened since then is there is some track work back where you see that water tower and that Y. That's been reconfigured. And the track does run along the back here. And it makes a loop and then goes behind this view block. Now, we'll turn and look. That view block is right there behind the S-scale furnace model of the Carnegie furnace that used to be in Johnson City. So again, this is all new here. The Y was in, but the track work between there and Cranberry is new. And then Elk Park is here. And with Planing Mill has been just put in here. We've got State Line Hill and the Shell Creek Peninsula. Now right here where it says the word creek, that is where the fill is, the Wilcox fill is there. It's one of the larger parts of the layout. And here's the first peninsula. So Shell Creek, the route of the railroad actually is underneath today's 19E. And so while it was a straight shot between Roan Mountain and Shell Creek, we've got a 180-degree turn to get into Roan Mountain. And you can see that large block is the Roan Mountain Hotel. And the block next to the tracks, of course, is the depot. We go into the town of Crabtree. This material was all built during the era of the Carter Museum. White Rock was the site of a large logging operation back in the 1900s. It had been cleared cut by the time we're modeling in 1925. These three buildings here are part of the Little Blevins area, which is actually the end of the Doe River Gorge. So this bridge here is the bridge in Blevins that still exists. And as you can see, that white mark out right there is actually the tunnel number 5, which the state dynamited because it was so unstable. The one end at the bridge side has actually got a liner in it, and the other end is rock. And now we're in the Doe River Gorge. So we run through the gorge. Up here is Tunnel 4 with the two bridges. There was a horseshoe curve in the river right there. And that was why the railroad had this backbone of rock and two bridges next to each other. And then again through the Doe River Gorge to Party Point. And here is Tunnel number 3 and Party Point coming out. And again, now we're back into this area here, which is Tunnel 2. And then into the town of Hampton. Now, this has been recently reworked. We have discovered it was dual gauge into Hampton due to a Ritter lumber operation that was still there. And so there's been a siding added into that area. And we've also got a standard gauge transfer area there. And then we come in here where this actually has been moved down to here. These bridges are down here now. And the area in the corner now has the showcase water-fed cistern and then a curve. And then you go into Tunnel 1, and then you're onto the long wooden-covered bridge. And then a short space to the Valley Forge Bridge, and then Coal Chute, which is now in place. So this is the end of the area that's been modeled to this point. We are now working on the area beyond that. So this will be the town of Elizabethton here, rather. And the Elizabethton Covered Bridge will be here and some other things. That loop will be standard gauge. The turntable is not going to be installed. And the view block is going to not be installed either along the edge because we've actually got a model of the Carnegie Mill being done by Chris Ford that will be on display publicly there. Again, yard facilities in the Johnson City area. And then you come around the corner. The depot is actually where you're looking at right here. The depot is actually now here. And as we move down, what will happen is there'll be a standard gauge. The end of the narrow gauge is at the depot. This, of course, is the Clinchfield Depot currently used by the Tourism Bureau of Johnson City. and then it will loop around here before it heads into the area that the new mine will be modeled at, which is right back here. The standard gauge Southern and Clinchfield main lines will be modeled in brief, but both will be continuously looped. So they will loop around down here and then come back over here to this hidden area behind Elizabethton, where you'll be able to run a standard gauge train around this area of the layout as well. So anyway, that's a look today at the Johnston City Road Experiences ET and WNC model. This is the largest in the world. This model was done as they were formulating how the railroad would look. And as you've seen in our other videos, we've got some details to show you as well. I am presently working on a story that will go in Model Railroader on this layout, and we have been published for the past 10 years in the HOn3 annual done by White River Productions. So, welcome to Tweetsie country. This is Geoff Stunkard. All right, so with the layout shut down, so it's quiet, we'll take a quick walk around. This is the loop at the end of Cranberry. So where we showed on our map, we're going to walk down the track work here over the Cranberry mine area. So you can see there's an engine facility here. You can see the tailings of the mine from decades of being dug out from the iron ore, engine house, and miscellaneous buildings. Here is the mine complex itself. So here's a photograph of it. Very few photographs exist of this very remote area, and that photograph was used with a few other detailed images to extrapolate out what this mine actually looked like. At the time we modeled, 1925, the bore for the mine was actually down underneath the main line at that point. Now, the town of Cranberry wasn't much of a town. We've modeled part of the industrial side of it, although there were workmen houses here for the miners. We don't have room to model a whole lot of this. What we do have is probably the world's only HOn3 tennis court, the well-known general store, a coal shed, the place they kept the mules at, and the Cranberry Depot with its iconic rounded roof there. So the track behind us here is actually looping behind the mountain as well as in the foreground at the same level. And to access Cranberry, you've got to come down the grade to get into this lower area. One benefit of modeling the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina is you are not stuck with Western level dry scenery. It was a damp Southern Appalachians get a lot of rain, so a lot of greenery in this layout. We've modeled spring to summer area, and so we've got blooming trees and flowers and things like that in this area. So the track is actually behind that first ridge line. And as we come down through here toward the Cranberry Y, you can see the company stores recently been added to there. And you can finally see the loop emerging from behind that hillside. And we've got a couple engines here on display, and this is the Cranberry Y. So the Cranberry Y had to be adopted from its original location when it was at the Car Museum. Everything was much tighter, so this is all added in here. This is a new valley that's been put in by Fred Alsop. As you can see, it's got rural stuff going on. The scenery is not finished yet, and the track runs on the upper hillside as we go into the town of Elk Park. Now, Elk Park was in North Carolina. It was the first town after you crossed over the border. And again, using photographs, we've accurately modeled the main block here. You can see the depot in the background. And one photo even showed a burned out building. We've got a model of that in this as well. A vintage Ford dealership, a casket dealer. And again, this was the end of Elk Park initially, and this fed into just right into the Greer Field. So this S-curve is new. And some of the industries have been freelanced into here. The ice and coal dealer, it's actually made from photographs of that building in Elk Park. And these are adopted to the location, including a gas station, a blacksmith shop, and a planing shop. So, and we come along here as we head toward Wilcoxville. We've got our abandoned mine, the abandoned Wilcox mine, and here is the fill, which as you can see is pretty impressive in terms of its size. So the tracks ran across the top of this. Some of this fill was taken out when they built 19E. They moved some of that material for the highway construction. Now we're coming kind of as you see it now. A number of these buildings are still there, including the schoolhouse, although quite dilapidated. I don't know how much longer it's for this world. And the buildings here on the main street. So when we were creating the layout, we realized we didn't have enough room to do anything but flats, and the suggestion was made to add this small peninsula out. And what that allowed us to do, although you can't see it with the lights out, is model the inside of these buildings. All three are still existent, and Fred was able to go up and look inside them and see what the interiors looked like and model that. This store over here is still there, as is this house. So bridges, of course, are long gone, and if you're on 19E, you will drive right down the center of this railroad to get to that point. Here's the bridge coming into the Shell Creek area, and we're heading toward Roan Mountain. One unique dividing point between Roan Mountain and Shell Creek was this truss bridge. And as you can see, we modeled Roan Mountain with one high-topped hill, house on a high-top hill, so you can kind of look down into the valley to see where the railroad ran at. And again, 19E runs through the center of this now. A few of these buildings are still existent. Perhaps the most famous one was this drugstore shown in one of Lucius Beebe's books. But a number of them have actually gone away even in the time we've been modeling the railroads. So, and the hotel is long gone. So the Roan Mountain Hotel was a place a lot of people would stay before they headed up to the highlands of Roan Mountain, where there was an even larger hotel, and the Cloudland. And so the Roan Mountain Hotel was actually a fairly busy place in its time. We're modeling 1925. I'm pretty sure the hotel, the Cloudland, had burned to the ground by that point. Here is the depot. And we come through, we see more drying wood. And again, the water tower that was designed by one of our members, Ben Merritt, and is offered now in Shapeways format. And that is the town of Roan Mountain. We've modeled that based on some photographs of the ET&WNC. Now, Roan Mountain is famous for its rhododendron festival, the largest rhododendron gardens on the planet. And we've modeled that here in the area of Crabtree. And again, working with existing structures, we were able to measure using photographs and using what's still there. This church still exists in the Crabtree area. And again, the railroad is not on 19 anymore. It's now paved single lane access that runs through several miles all the way to the Doe River Gorge. Track location, where we are here in White Rock. Actually, behind us was where the majority of the timbering was done. So where I'm standing to film this is actually a fairly substantial cliff. And there were two ridges, and the clear cutting brought the logs down from the mountaintop over the top of the track and into that siding in the background. So the siding platform is still existent in the gorge. It is much lower than the actual railhead, but to try to model that where it'd be functional, we would have to drop it way, way down. So, and this was, White Rock was actually modeled between the two largest cuts, Big Nance Cut and Little Nance Cut. So again, you can ride your bike or even drive your car through this gorge here, through this cut, and eventually you'll end up in the town of Blevins. And this was one of the areas that we were proudest to model, because we actually had a woman who had lived in this house come and see us while we were still at the Card Museum. Gladys Lacey, she unfortunately has passed at this point, but that's her up on the loading dock. And she corrected us that her dress was red, not blue, and we adopted that. Again, using the one vintage photograph of this, we were able to replicate the signs and also freelance the depot. Got a couple of trains sitting here, and as we head toward the Doe River Gorge, we have got this iron truss bridge, which again is part of the road that still exists. It's paved now. Due to the storm in late 2024, some of the road has collapsed beyond the bridge. We don't recommend you drive back there. There's very little way to turn around, but it is paved, and you can ride a bicycle back there if you want to. And now we come to the first of the big tunnels. This is Sand Tunnel, and it was best known as the worst of the tunnels on the ET&WNC in the era that the trains ran. It was actually so unstable that when the railroad was abandoned in 1950, it was dynamited closed to prevent people from going inside. As you can see, there is a tunnel liner going into this side of the tunnel, but the other side is still rock. But this is very decaying rock work underneath this point, but there was no choice because of the way the Doe River Gorge swang around this corner. And once you're across the hillside, now you can see the opening on the other side, which obviously was cut from rock that was a little more stable. But again, using photographs, we're able to replicate the erosion of the constant sliding. Now you are coming into the actual Doe River Gorge right here. So for the next several feet, we're going to be in the depths of it. And you can see the main line follows the course of the river all the way through this on a shelf that's usually above flood zone, not always, but it did survive this latest group of floods. Now, the church camp that owns the portion of the railroad still owns this section between the river and the hillside where the railroad once ran. And once you're through that, and again, able to model the greenery of the Southern Appalachians, you come to the first of the major bridges in the gorge, which is this truss bridge. This truss bridge that was over the Doe River, which made a horseshoe curve around the hillside behind it. So to the north, or to the west rather, of this image, where this image is built at, the river does a 180-degree turn and comes right back. So you've got this backbone of rock and then right back over the river again. Now, all these bridges were custom and scratch built. None of them are available commercially. And again, time was taken to make sure that they were accurately measured. They are true to length to the original, so they are accurate in size and design. And again, time was taken to model the rock work and the abutments. And again, it's into this bore and right out the other side. So in modeling the gorge itself, the idea obviously was to make the scenery as dramatic as possible. And while it doesn't go to the floor, it certainly raises toward the ceiling. And you can see in this image, you can see the plastic divider that keeps people from reaching in and trying to pick flowers. But the track runs along this narrow shelf. And you can see these trusses here. This was actually from a washout where they had to really rebuild this area during a flood in 1901. And so this is where it filled in. And again, our hot lights here make it hard to not have shadows falling into my images. But again, you can get an understanding of just how dramatic the scenery is going almost to the ceiling right here. And again, the track curves around. And we're at Party Point. We're going over one of the other fills that's made here. And we come into tunnel number 3, which is basically, it's not the entrance to the gorge, but is certainly in the depths of the gorge. Tunnel 3 emerges from this side of the peninsula. This is what we just looked at, was the peninsula here. And so Tunnel 3 is on this peninsula. The second tunnel is Sand Tunnel. The third peninsula is the bridge in between Shell Creek and Roan Mountain. And then Cranberry beyond that. And the item you can see to the furthest to the left underneath the railroad crossing is the S-scale model of the Carnegie Mill. So Tunnel 3 comes around and quickly goes right into Tunnel 2. Now, in real life, there's about a mile and a half of space there. We did not have room to model that. But that did leave us room to. So at the end of Tunnel 2, we come to one of the most iconic places on the railroad, which is the bridge at Hampton. Johnny Krause's photo on the last day of operations showing a train coming from the tunnel is very well known. And again, the tunnel is to the bridge rather is to scale length, covered bridge. And again, we've got the Ritter lumber operation now modeled against the back wall here at Hampton. and that track disappears into the scenery. And again, here's the covered bridge. The abutments are still there, and there's a little honorarium right there at the location where you can go and. So again, a beautiful model of this location, well known in the annals of the Tweetsie. And we've got again some freelance material here from the Ritter Lumber Company, which was also right there in the Hampton area. In fact, there's an area now known as Rittertown still existing in Hampton. So here's the depot at Hampton, which unfortunately is long gone, but the track is still running along the edge of the river, as you can see. And as we move down outside of Hampton, we come to what we discovered to be one of the most unique aspects of the Tweetsie Railroad, this natural cistern that was used to water locomotives as they came toward the gorge. Mike Sagers again went uphill, and he traced out the spring that came down and how it got down to this location here where the railroad built this cistern to hold water. And when the train stopped, a person from the railroad could then climb up and open the valve up, and the water would flow into the tenders. This, of course, kept the problems of having to try to get water from either down in the river or one of the springs that came out of the mountainside. It would have taken a long time to do that. So this is the only water stop between here and the White Rock area. And again, we're back into coming toward Tunnel 1, which has just recently been refinished by Fred Alsop. And you can see again the waterfall coming down out of the mountainside, the entrance to Tunnel 1 right here, and the Del River down below it. Well known as Tunnel 1, of course, was where the end of the long wooden bridge was at. And this was a covered bridge that was made of steel, but it dramatically, the trains came out of the tunnel and ended up on this. We've replicated the now abandoned highway bridge, which is still there over the Doe River at this area. Now the railroad bridge, one of Buckman, is still there. It's long gone. And then 19E would be to where the left of the camera is. But you can see we've modeled the notation there for the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina. And this is one of the favorite places for our visitors to come to see when we're running trains. Again, you can get another idea of how big this bridge is. Fred used a 2x4 board and twisted it on end and basically added the sheeting and, to replicate wood covering on the bridge itself, and a piece of metal that topped it off, and then the track. And it's a very accurate looking vision of what that looked like. And again, the Doe River below it, and you can see the highway bridge in the background. Now again, we are following through Valley Forge, and once again, we've got accurate bridges. Now 19E is in place where these bridges are, so there's no sign of them. There's no abutments left or anything like that. But using old photographs, we were able to model them at full size. So leaving Valley Forge, we came to one of the railroad's more unique structures. This is called Coal Chute. This was a place where the locomotives could coal. The railroad had no formal coal docks or coal towers beyond this one. They actually had a trestle they used in Johnson City, but the other locations were doing by hand and shovel the coal from a trackside bin into the locomotives. And you can see here, this is also requiring a lot of manual labor. So the standard gauge hopper cars would be put up here, and just remember there was coal service that also went up to all these businesses, including the mine. It ran on coal, so the coal served a huge purpose in the area where the railroad ran. So there was a lot of customers who had coal, which the railroad would bring up in their narrow gauge cars from this location. Now, while they could have certainly transloaded everything in Johnson City, it was much easier to do it here, and they, again, this was a pretty substantial operation that required people and a lot of hard effort. So, and the railroad is standard gauged, as I said, all the way to Hampton now. So, and Fred has modeled some agrarian facilities here, some barns and some plants growing and things like that. And that is the end of the scenic part of the railroad. This is the loop for the standard gauge. Once it's done, as you can see, it's got switches on it now, but eventually that will not be on there because we will be running trains around that. Here is the town of Elizabethton, and again, just using some structures as an idea of what it will look like. And then the track works its way along here. The quarry at Milligan is pretty well known, and the siding is being put in right now for that service. Obviously, the quarry was limestone, which went straight to the mill at Carnegie. Again, here's the Johnston City engine facilities. You can see the fantasy locomotives that were put in there that had the Tweetsie survived after 1950 and dieselized. That might have been what they would have used, though I doubt the budget would have been there for that. The rail bus in the lower left is actually something that was also recently researched, and it only ran for a couple of months. A bus service started almost the same time, and it quickly proved to be inefficient at making money or getting people where it needed to go. So come out of the Johnston City engine facility, you can see the paint shop, and here is the other coal ramp where they would have coaled engines in this area. And again, while Coal Chute is not that far away physically on the model railroad, in real life it was about 15 miles away from downtown. So now we come through here to Johnston City, and you can see the Johnston City Depot that's been rebuilt and replicated to full scale by Fred Alsop. Across the way will be the current CC&O depot, the current Tourism Bureau's office, but that's the original Clinchfield Depot. This is the end of the narrow gauge here, and the southern main line runs through here. And I guess the southern, if it ties in, will not tie in this area. And then the Clinchfield main line will be making this loop around. And visitors to the museum will be able to come back here now. And the mill will be built right back here. As you can see, Chris Ford has done part of the furnace work. And you can see he's sketched out where all the buildings are going to go on this. So anyway, that's it for a Sunday morning here in Tweetsie land, and hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be continuing to cover the return of Tweetsie country. Thanks again.